So here we have the unethical prices of prescription drugs brought to you by Ethan,
Carson,
Andrew, and Danny. So throughout recent years, price of prescription drugs has seen exponential increases. According to Diana M. Porter in her article, "The Cost of Prescription Drugs is Outrageous," expenditures for prescription drugs were $200.7 billion in 2005, which is nearly 5 times the $40.3 billion spent in 1990. Here we see that per person, the inflation-adjusted retail prescription drug spending in the U.S. increased from $90 in 1960 to $1,025 in 2017. With these high prices today, many find it hard to afford the prescription drugs that they need. Here we also see sharp increases in overall prescription drug spending from 2013 to 2014, which was nearly $50 billion due to these unethical price increases.
because the companies are trying to develop better technology, they will be able to perfect the drugs and produce them for a cheap price. When they mass produce these drugs and they find out how to perfect the manufacturing, the way that they manufacture them, they will be able to put all of these drugs out into the market, therefore lowering the price of the whole industry.
However, it may not even matter considering a lot of companies, especially large biologics, have been taking a variety of measures to avoid losing their monopolies. Some have been amassing large patent portfolios, while others have been known to file lawsuits and abuse regulatory processes to delay the entry of competing products into the market. Now, not only does this waste people's time and money in an immoral and unethical way, but it restricts the possibility of competition entering the market, thus leaving prices higher.
Reflecting off what Andrew said, there may be a solution: generic drugs. Generic drugs are drugs that are being viewed as a potential game changer in the drug industry's future. In an article written by Diana M. Zuckerman, an American health policy analyst, she sat down and interviewed with FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. When interviewing Gottlieb, he talked about the FDA's proposal of a drug competition action plan. The main purpose of the plan is to help approve medicines faster, even if it prevents brand-name pharmaceutical companies from gaming the system. Even though these generic drugs have not made an impact yet and the prices have not lowered, the outcome of these drugs is currently unknown.
Going back to the technology aspect, while companies are trying to develop the technology and they're trying to research, they can't because they're being held back due to restrictions and regulations. One restriction is money. Companies just do not have the money. And one regulation is from the FDA, where they put such steep prices on these drugs to make sure that once they get out into the market, they're going to do a lot of good and no harm, and that way the industry is going up instead of being held back.
Now, although these companies have to charge more to make up for the prices of regulations, they end up charging a lot more than necessary oftentimes. According to the Campaign for Sustainable Prescription Drug Pricing, a project of the National Coalition on Healthcare, dozens of pharmaceutical companies rang in the new year by increasing prescription drug prices by up to 15 times the rate of inflation, despite the fact that their profits continue to far exceed spending on research and development. This unethical profit gained from innocent patients, shown here by this graph, needs to stop now.
With all the technology and scientific research behind these drugs, the companies are just trying to make a profit. While this saying is true, they are putting too much money into their pocket and not putting enough into research. As you can see here, they're putting a lot more money into their pocket than they should be. If they research just a little bit, if they put a little bit more money into research, then they would be able to be more developed in the future, because everyone's heard the saying, time is money. And so if they just put a little bit more money into research, then they would be able to get all this valuable time in the future.
To go off of what Carson said, companies in America are especially trying to make a profit. According to E.J. Dion, a longtime journalist for the Washington Post, she says that today consumers in America are estimated to spend up to 38% more on drugs than consumers in Canada, and up to 45% more than consumers in France. This fact speaks for itself, showing that America is the greediest of them all. The economic structure in America doesn't correspond with how much Americans are having to pay for these drugs. America is located in a safe, accessible environment where drugs are constantly flying on and off its shelves. So why people in America have to pay more than people in other countries is baffling.
Now, because biologics cost many more millions to produce compared to generic counterparts, and I quote, "there are not very many companies with the kind of facilities, expertise, and money necessary to develop interchangeable versions of biologics and chaperone them through the FDA's approval process, end quote. So this is talking about both generic drugs and biologic drugs and how the FDA has caused the prices to spike quite dramatically, especially with biologics.
Now, the FDA is taking an approach to try to lower these prices. Because biologics cost so much and take so much time to produce, companies in America are especially trying to lean on the manufacturing of generic drugs. Generic drugs help with increasing in competition, as I talked about before, but they also help in lowering prices. In fact, in the 10-year span from 2003 to 2012, generic drugs were estimated to save Americans about $1.2 trillion.
Going off of what Danny stated, the website ScienceDirect.com claims that generic drugs do not need to include the same inactive ingredients as the name brand drugs. As you can see here, the active ingredients are the exact same, but the price is a lot lower. So just that one small change in ingredients is a really big change in price.
Now, these generic drugs can be closely compared to those sold on the markets of foreign countries with high regulation standards. According to a journalistic article on the prescription drug price debate, these foreign drugs are made by U.S. companies and are only sold in foreign countries. Now, importing these foreign drugs is often viewed by some as a potential quick fix solution to high prices in the U.S., but realistically, the price to transport these foreign drugs into the U.S. would not justify the efforts necessary. In reflection to today, President Trump in his 2018 remarks on prescription drug cost speech states that last year the FDA approved more than 1,000 low-cost generics, the most in history, which has already saved the American people nearly $9 billion. Keeping these results in mind, this could be seen as a potential solution continuing into the future.
So as we see here, resolutions to this issue may not be as complicated or requiring of so many complicated regulations as some believe.
Another solution to these high costs is just wait for the technology to develop. Over time, the technology will develop and the prices will drop. In 2015, the average price for a sickle cell treatment was $20,000. Now, just 4 years later, it's down to $16,500. That shows that over 4 years, it has dropped a lot. Who knows how much it'll drop in the future.
Now, what could happen is that the government could reimburse the pharmaceutical company after the fanatical cost spent in the pursuit of the new life-saving drug, rather than the companies charging patients extra for the products in order to make up for their expenses. Then it should give the company a smaller patented period, 5 to 10 years or so they still have the ability to make money from their legwork. Then the patent would go out regardless of the circumstances, and competition could then flood the market. It is now in the taxpayers' best interest because through their money, new miracle drugs can be produced to cure a wide range of once incurable diseases.
Now, taking all these possibilities into account, the high cost of prescription drugs today will most definitely be lowered in time. New competition brought by generic drugs over time will bring down prices of the already existing companies. And as well as this, developing new technology will help to bring down the prices of manufacturing as well as increase the rate of manufacturing, therefore bringing down prices. As previously mentioned, although importation may be viewed as a potential solution or a quick fix solution to some, the efforts necessary to transport foreign drugs into the U.S. would not justify the efforts necessary to get that there.
As you can see, there are many ways in which we can talk about how overpricing drugs has no effect on ethicality, but we believe that there are many negative effects based on people having to pay for overpricing drugs. Because drug prices remain an unethical price, many people have suffered and have gone through traumatic times because they can't buy what they need to live a healthy life. Since the prices are too steep for many to reach today, we as a group believe that the prices of these drugs needs to drop in the future to allow people more access to the drugs that they need. Thank you.
Yep, all the way back there.
Great. Okay, a few questions. I'm going to start with you, Andrew. In one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Carson's findings.
Carson's findings. So, originally when I went in there, I was originally expecting that, of course, they were all going to be unethical, right? They had too much profit. But then Carson came in here and he kind of said, well, it's not so much, but of course we changed it over time. But he comes in here. He said, well, maybe the profit isn't unethical, right? Maybe the market research, it all kind of goes in together. They're making a decent amount of money, right? So thinking changed a tiny bit there. However, as time went on, of course, we went over that view, but that is how my thinking changed a little bit.
Thank you. Ethan, you are next. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you decided to exclude from your team presentation, and why?
Well, as Andrew mentioned, Carson did argue. I'm sorry to call you out, but Carson did argue, or not really argue, but brought up good points about how prescription drugs could be ethical, or how they are justified for charging so much. But as we really came together and discussed, we decided that the companies really do make a lot more profit than necessary in order to, make a decent profit off of their efforts. So yeah, that's why we chose to leave that out.
Carson, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual report that made you think differently about your team's solution or conclusion.
So it was definitely Danny's because he's the futuristic lens. So he made me think more about how this is going to change in the future. So one of our solutions was to wait for the technology to develop. And we came to that solution because Danny showed us lots of information that pointed towards the lowering of costs in the future. So that is how.
Great. And finally, Danny, describe how the content of your team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
Yeah, so obviously from our individual IRs, it was more of like a report based, and as we came in here, we kind of switched it to an argument, and so we had to change the content because obviously our IR was filled with lots of broad information that we all thought was important in our individual lenses, but so we had the content of ours was very, so in the beginning we picked out a lot of ideas that we were gonna maybe use, and then we had to narrow it down even more from there. So the content that we used was like the best that we could get. We really had to narrow it down.
Okay.